Mother by R. Jean Turchin. She watched with other engineers hunched over the feeds from remote cameras as the pumps pulled the smoke from the tunnel after the fire was extinguished. A 12-foot section of the tube had been shredded, as if blasted by a runaway food processor blade. Thick metal was torn like ripped paper. An inky blackness seemed to writhe in the depths of the collider tube. Sarah's team was tasked with inspecting the torus ring to evaluate the accident. It took an hour after the blast to exhaust the smoke, shut down the equipment, and test for toxic material. Even though indicators were negative for toxic debris, they still followed protocol by suiting up. Wearing anti-sea coveralls and a helmet like the others, Sarah brought up the rear of the group of 9 scientists as they inched forward through the narrow maze of pipes and cables. The group moved shoulder to shoulder in pairs, the bulky suits obscuring the view through the passage for all except the 2 men in front. She could only see the backs and oversized headgear of the men in front. Movement was difficult and shuffling in the tight space. The lead pair, a mechanical engineer and photographer, stopped abruptly as if blocked by a wall. Those in the middle and rear assumed the front men were slowed by the rubble until the screams started. Sarah heard the screams through her headset. The voice of the photographer rose in an animal howl as the sound of cold fear tore from his throat. Her heart froze and she held her breath. What could make him scream like that? Was he hurt? The entire group turned as one unit and pushed back, propelling her away from the tube. It became a wave of panicked bodies carrying her back down the corridor. She stumbled against pipes, banging her head and arms. The entrance hatch loomed ahead, and she rushed forward as the men behind pushed and shoved. The sound of wretched vomiting and mumbled words that made no sense blanketed her headset. She twisted the wheel of the door and jerked it open, but was pushed aside by the others trying to exit the maintenance tunnel. She stole a fearful glance back at the passage before finally stepping through and sealing the door. A blurred image of an otherness formed behind her eyes, even though she had not seen the thing in the accelerator tube. Squeezing them shut only made the vision sharper. She drew ragged breaths as she slumped back against the hatch. What happened? Only Jeff, the engineer, and 2 others had remained waiting for her. Everyone else had continued running. Alarm klaxons boomed and emergency strobes flashed down the hall. Jeff had removed his helmet and was bent over, hands on his knees, dry heaving. Between the spasms, he gasped, "Robots." He gagged and coughed again. "We'll need robots and a containment chamber. No cameras. Tell them we can't look at it." He slumped to the floor. It took 38 hours to get the robots and the box, the size of a small upright closet. It was triple-walled, vacuum between the first wall and inert gas in the second. They guided the robots with proximity sensors. The thing was alive. They sensed its life. Jeff could only describe what he saw in vague terms. The agency investigators, bland men in dark suits, asked simple questions. Did it have arms? Were there distinct body parts? Did it have a head? Eyes? Sarah shook her head. "I don't know. I didn't really see it," she said. "I was at the very end of the group in the passage." She was still processing the incident after 2 days when she visited Paul, the photographer, and Jeff, the engineer, in the hospital off-site. "You can't stay long. Paul is in a catatonic state," the ICU nurse told her. "If you try talking to him, please don't mention the incident." Did he breathe something? Was it radiation? Sarah still did not know exactly what had materialized when the accelerator tube had shattered. Only that something alive came out, and it was something not of this world. The nurse shook her head. "I can't say." She glanced down the hall. "The doctors are guessing he saw something his mind couldn't process. Mental trauma like PTSD. She'd known Jeff casually through work. Jeff at least could talk when she sat next to his bed, though he easily lost track of the conversation and stared with a blank look. Paul died on the 4th day after the explosion. They said the cause was whole-body trauma, whatever that meant. Jeff was transferred to another facility, a military hospital, rumor said. She didn't get to say goodbye. When the men questioned her again, she asked about the thing in the tube. "Is it something we made in the accelerator?" she asked. They scribbled notes on their pads and ignored her question. No answers were forthcoming. The questions themselves made one of the scientists re-experience the trauma of the encounter, and he regurgitated his lunch across the desk and onto the papers of the agent. Thereafter, they deleted the questions that began with, "Try to visualize." "You were the least traumatized by the encounter," the nameless man said. "We want you to attempt communications. It's alive, and so it needs to eat or consume energy in some way. Don't you agree?" She nodded, not liking the direction of his thought. "If we withhold food now that we have it locked up securely, it might cooperate to eat. We have no idea what it needs. We don't know what capacities it has. All we've got after a week of tests is that it radiates a sense of power and," she searched for the right word, "evil. I don't want to have anything to do with it. It needs to be destroyed. It tried to eat our souls." The man shrugged, then nodded. "It's intelligent, so we cannot let this go. This is first contact." He paused. "We've sealed it in behind several layers of our strongest steel and carbon fiber alloys. You should be safe." "Should be?" she asked. "Nothing is 100%, you know that, and we've taken every precaution. Some of those people lost their minds, and Paul died. It's like that thing ate his spirit." The man's face remained stoic, but acknowledged her concern with the tip of his head. "Will you do it?" She looked down at her hands and absently picked a nail. "It's evil. I don't want to be around it." She lifted her eyes to meet the agent's. "It's evil," she said again. He nodded, and now the silent man who had been standing behind him leaning against a wall stepped forward. "Sarah," he said, touched the other man on the shoulder and shifted his eyes towards the door. The agent questioning her gave another half nod and left the room. The second man did not sit. "We think it is from another dimension, another universe possibly. Are you familiar with the brain theory?" Sarah shrugged. "Some of our people, really bright ones," he waved his hands in a circle, "like you people here, think it has something to do with the leaking between universes. Between brains, and that's how it got here. This could be a huge breakthrough, and you could be right at the forefront." Paul's face kept floating up in front of her like a white scrap of paper in a dirty river. It was a crumpled blankness, as if everything that was Paul had been leached out, leaving a dried, desiccated husk. He died when he looked upon it, then his body lived on for a week, and now they were asking her to attempt to communicate with the thing. She gave in, collapsed, weary from the continuous appeals. Like accepting death, she thought. National security, fate of the world, no one else can do it. She acquiesced and was immediately drowned with a sense of dread and fear. Where would she find the strength? "This is how it works," he explained. "The escape mechanism is triggered by a button squeezed tight in your hand. When released, it jerks you away like a pilot's ejection seat. In the control room, we slam doors and pull you out. These goggles filter the spectrum of colors surrounding it. The colors not of this earth," he said. "The colors that seem to make humans sick." She held the tray of raw meat, the gift. Quid pro quo. "In this world, a mother is one who feeds a child. I call her mother because she brings nourishment. Mother unlocks the door and enters to feed me. The thin blade of light slices through the darkness momentarily as I reach for it, but she shuts it quickly. Too much light is bad for your eyes, she says. She does not touch me. Mechanical hands with steel bones and electrical motors move inside a glass box. This is how she reaches me through a double-sealed lock. She inserts food through another slot, again double-sealed, micro-machine joints so that not even a whisper can penetrate the barrier. The breath of life is long gone from the dead food. Bare nutrients to sustain my physical flesh, but lacking fresh soul blood. Mother has insulated herself from me with barriers. Passive panels shed photons on my cell, while a faint cold glow from some hidden source provides enough light to my receptors to illuminate her features. Her face contorts and twists with fear and revulsion at my appearance. We lived before accretion formed rocks, giving birth to this planet and its puny flesh. Our tongues tasted the slime colonies of multicelled creatures before man, before primitive chemicals joined together to reproduce and then feed on each other to become complex eukaryotic cells. For a time we ruled this meat-suit planet from our dark places, but men learned of us, and through their own magic drove us back across the barrier. We were too long walled out of our rightful space. Man's words and images harbored the power to open the doors between spaces. Words written in a special book, old words with power. What was magic is now called science. We waited because this world had once given us lustful pleasures then. Sensing the time had come once more, we expanded our energies against the door, but we were met with 10,000 whirring blades, a shearing spasm of rejection. The old ones were torn asunder, its screaming shards of meat flesh. The energy exceeded any force we had experienced across the endless worlds of our realm. The other ones gave themselves to shield me with their bulk and let fly strong curses that I might keep the door ajar. Man, it appeared, had harnessed fearsome power. Their machine was constructed to fling elemental particles like bullets, crashing them together and releasing potent energies. Something went wrong as it exploded and keyed the door open. Those same particle beams were slashing scimitars of death that slew my brothers as they traversed the gate. I was spared by their sacrifice. Once across, the lower energies from the machine were delicious food, and I sucked like a hungry infant until its teats ran dry and smoke billowed from the torus. They found me overfed and a sated, drunken torpor, and the humans were able to encase me in this lightless cube. The knowledge of their minds flowed into me at the instant of my crossing. I learned their synchrotron was constructed in an isolated valley where grasses were raw, sharp things and trees bore only a few pallid, sparse leaves. Ancient man had shunned the tract as an unholy place. They said water accumulated in pools like the scat of a festering giant and gave off the stench of odor and decay. Those early first men felt the power of place, the result of an intersection of dimensions which accorded power to the geographic coordinate. It permeated the ground, infected things that grow, and chilled the air. Modern men held no respect for the spirit of a place. The old men of the native people were both wielders and harvesters of these intersections. The craggy-faced old crones with milky eyes who spoke in hoarse, cryptic whispers were warning beacons, but now they have passed, and the scientific man believes he knows more. I am alone and weak on their earth, though I grow stronger. The first could not stand in the presence of my power, and now they send her with offerings. Will she offer up her soul? The aura of fear bathes her in a milky green light even through the metal and glass barriers, and yet she lies just beyond my touch. When we came before, man could not limit us. Only the place where both worlds met held constraints, allowing so few of us across. And those few only being allowed with the speaking of the forbidden words. It had been enough to sustain us until a solitary man slammed shut our passageway, giving of his blood to bolt the door. How we have craved the taste of man since that time. The breaking through the wall weakened my corporal and psychic essence. Sucking the souls of those who came upon the rupture sustained me, but it was never enough. These creatures have grown too quickly, and now the scientific man is able to enclose me with their machines. I have become hungry again. The greater need is not physical, but for the thing they call the soul. It is mine to suckle until it shrivels into a dried and wasted husk. Sarah felt the air puff up inside the suit. Like a deep-water diver, she thought, encased against the elemental pressure. The water was cold and irritated her nose. Her eyes watered, forming tears that ran down. "Sarah," a soft voice cackled in her ear. "We've got your 6. We've taken every precaution. You can do this. If anything at all doesn't feel right, release the button." She tried to recall his name, the confident man from the government team. He was responsible for keeping her safe. He touched her arm before she climbed into the suit, a reassuring gesture. What was his name? "Roger," she said. "I'm ready." "No, I'm not. But I will do this. For Paul and for the others." She heaved the meat bag as the thick door swung on noiseless hinges. It was dark inside. 3 airlocks. A Manhattan project cobbled together out of fear. And above all, the small-scale nuke, a last resort. Inside the last door, her eyes adjusted to the darkness. Only a faint, shielded light caressed the last lock and drawer. This will be the most critical part. Our shields are minimal here. We know it is hungry. All you have to do is insert the meat bag in the drawer. The automation will do the rest. It will sense we are offering food and will attempt to communicate. Her left hand held the button at her side. Movement was awkward in the suit. She slipped into the chair and a harness fastened her in. She knew she was isolated from its sounds, but she still felt she could hear the horrible wet slurping as it gorged on the meat. "What are you?" she thought. Her head rang like the inside of a bell with its reply. "I am those who came before man." The single eye was a red globe with a vertical yellow night predator pupil. It reminded Sarah of alligator eyes. Images of a toad-like body structure formed out of the sickly green haze surrounding it. "Can you understand me?" she vocalized. She wanted the others to hear, not to be isolated with the thing inside her head. Was the voice real? Yes, the voice had the tenor of a jackhammer. It gave off a sting of a malevolent intelligence. "Shit!" The expletive sounded in her headpiece. "How can it do that? We have auto-dampening on the electronics," the man in the control room said. Was the meat sufficient for nourishment? Calling the bag food was not something she could bring herself to do. "We were not sure you could tolerate our nutrients. Do you understand?" Something like a hollow laugh echoed in the vocal spectrum and in her head. "I eat. I consume." It paused. "I will survive even if you withhold sustenance. You cannot bargain. These chambers may fade to rust and dust, and I will still be." She risked a push. "But you are confined." "For now," it replied. She felt a hot volcanic nausea rising up in her. "Pull me back," she said. "I'm done for now." She felt the latch engage under the chair, and it moved her slowly out of the nested chamber. Her hands were shaking as she unfastened the latches and connectors of the suit. Technicians swarmed around her. He was there when they disconnected her helmet. Sarah, you did very well. We got a lot of data. The team wants to do a debriefing. Think you're up to it? She nodded. His face showed concern. We can wait, he said. No, let's be done with it. The lights in the conference room were dim. Can we turn up the lights? She said to whoever followed her. I need it to be bright. She felt like she was slogging through thick weeds, like seaweed, the way it tangles around your feet near the shore. Slimy. Her head was stuffed like a bad sinus cold, thick and muffled. Am I even awake? He stood at the head of the table while he waited for the others to be seated. She still couldn't pull his name from memory. His eyes moved to each of the members as if counting. Sarah felt she was struggling to stay awake after having been anesthetized, as if she was caught in a vague, continuously rolling film of sporadic, disconnected images where nothing made sense. The feeling started the moment the thing broke through the synchrotron. Thank you all for your efforts this morning. He inclined his head slightly toward her, silently singling her out among them. Now we've made contact with the creature, intelligent and alien. You were very brave. The speaker exuded a zen-like calm, but it had no effect